So if anybody of you has any questions, you just have to let me know. Just give me a shout and I can answer it. So we got those there. Then I have the OP1 here, which is, I brought it with me because I wanted to share with you a lot. Is that, for me, this is a great MIDI controller sequencer type of machine. I use the MIDI out over USB into the Canton box here. And that MIDI out goes into the Octatrack. Now the Octatrack MIDI output goes into the analog 4 and then the rhythm. So with this setup, I can actually select which MIDI channel that I want to affect on the Octatrack and then control whatever machine that I want. That's how I use it in the studio. So Octatrack is the master in the MIDI chain, and then this one goes into the MIDI input. So right now I'm controlling the track number 1 of the analog 4. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has an OP1, but the sequencers on this thing is really cool, I think. For example, I have this sequencer here, which, yeah. So what I really like doing is now I can instantly capture this into the sequence. Of course, but I should set the BPM the same. So let's set the BPM to 124, because that's the BPM it is. Yeah. So when I think, if I just press these 2 buttons, which is the real-time recording mode, I can capture that into the machine, into the analog 4. So now I have the notes here. You can see that the lights are there, and yeah. So now this is in the analog 4 sequencer. I find this a very creative way to come up with sequences that I normally don't. This is what I really like the OP1, and this is what I brought it here to show you that trick. And this applies to other sound sources. So if I go with number track 2, number 3, yeah. So you can get these type of weird stuff very easily because I'm just sending some weird notes into the machine, and you can capture it instantly, I think. But anyway, let's not get carried away with that. Then I have the Digitact and Digitone here, and these are the stuff that we just recently released. The Digitone was in January, so I'll keep that for the last. Because if I start with that, many of you will probably leave. So yeah, you have to wait till the end if you want to know more about it. So the Digitact is a sampler, and the Digitone is a synth. We'll go into the details of them later on. So as you can see by the size of them, and the price tag also, it's kind of like half of these machines. And I think these are really, really cool machines, but these ones have got these few pro features that they don't have. So, it's oranges and apples, I think. But let's start with the Octatrack then. So, does anybody have Octatrack here? Are you a user? Do you like the machine? Do you have any problems with it? No. Oh, so you don't like the machine?
Only new sequencer, please.
A new sequencer? What do you mean a new?
This one. The new one.
The one?
Like the analog.
Yeah, so you want the sequencer to be changed on the Octatrack. Interesting you say that, because the way I see it, Octatrack is the best sequencer out of all of them, I think. The reason is because each of the tracks can have a different tempo multiplier, and I think that's really, really cool. The other ones don't offer that. The Octatrack also has 8 audio tracks and then 8 MIDI tracks. So that is 16 tracks in total. And it's a sampler. It's an 8-track dynamic performance sampler, we like to call it. And let's go to an empty bank here, this one. Yeah, so I have a compact flash card here, and then you could load in your samples into it. And you have 2 stereo inputs, and then you have a Q output where you can assign any of the tracks into an external output. The way that I like using it is I have the Q output going into my modular FX rack. So if I want to have only the kicks or the bass line or some multiple tracks, I can just press Q button here, and then I can press the tracks that I want. And you can see now they're flashing. So the tracks that are flashing goes out on the Q output. This is a pretty neat feature, which most of the time it's people forget it. They don't. Yeah. I've only been using it after years of using the Octatrack. So it came to me much later on. I never bothered about the Q output until these recent times. And so that's the kind of the hardware. The difference between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2, yeah, good question, is the screen is much better. I think it is a lot better. Then we have extra buttons here, which for parts, and audio editor, which is a cool button, because you can instantly go to the audio and see it. And if you press function and the audio editor button, you can go into the slice settings very quickly. So you can quickly slice up your audio samples on this one. On the Mark 1, you have to go into the audio editor and then choose slice and then choose the amount. So this method saves a bit more button presses there. Then you have mix and arranger modes, which, yeah. And then another button we've added for the Mark II is the record 3 button, which that can be used for mainly resampling the Octatrack. So you can select which track that you want to resample or the main output using the record 3 button here. That's what it does. Then we have the Vader, and that's more or less the same as the Mark 1. And another thing to mention is the inputs and the outputs they've been improved for the Mark II, which I thought that when I first started using this, I did hear a difference on it, and it was pretty interesting to hear that. But let's try to make some sounds and beats on this. So now I'm scrolling through the samples that I have in the machine. And I have these loops. Let's see. So I load that in and I just select it. Now in theory this should work according to the BPM that I've placed, that I have. It's set to 1, 2, 4. And I see that this sample is 1, 2, 3. So we should play correctly. I'll put one step at the beginning of the sequencer and the rest of the sample will play. So I'll turn this off. Yeah. It doesn't really play properly, so it's a good example. Yeah, because the loop is not set properly. Let's see here. So you can go into the settings and select. Let's do it like this. Hopefully this will work. Yeah, this is because the loop is not cut properly. I shouldn't be using these samples. So I go to another folder. I shouldn't have started there. Let's see here. Yeah, let's try these drum and bass. These loops are cut properly. I know them. Go on the drums. Loops. Yeah. So I can load multiple loops in like this. So I have loaded up a few loops into the unit. This is one here. So if I choose that loop and set the BPM a bit faster because it's a bit more faster content. So I set for 165 and the actual loop is 172. The Octatrack has got the time stretch feature, so it will change the waveform to fit into the sequence. But for that to work, you need to cut the waveform properly, because as we saw on the previous example, they weren't cut properly. They were just stuff that taken from YouTube, so I didn't cut them properly. To make them work, you need to spend time a bit and make sure that the Octatrack understands the timing of the sample, basically. Yeah, this is working as it should be. Yeah. So I'm using one track out of 8 tracks, and each of the tracks offers you like 2 effect blocks. So you can have effects such as like a filter. That's and one of my favorite one is the lo-fi, where you can do bit reduction and a distortion loop. Yeah, and then if you put because you got 2 effect blocks, you can put distortion and other things that makes it sound angry on the first effect block, And on the second one, you can put the filter. Or let's try the DJ equalizer, which is a three frequency based equalizer. And so we could like maybe enhance the boost in the low end and get rid of the mids and the highs too. Yeah, you can do that stuff. So the effects on this thing is they are very suitable to mash up your samples, but they really shine when you actually assign the 3 LFOs to them, because each of the tracks offers you 3 LFOs. So I'm going to assign one of the LFOs to the equalizer's high gain setting. Let's do the LFO quite fast too and see what the result is. Okay. So you can do this stuff, and you can make the LFO trick in sync with the beats. And one of my really favorite features is to actually trigger different samples in the same track. So here I have that loop that is playing, but if I, let's say on this step here, I'm going to assign another loop, and here I assign something else, and here I assign another sample, and I decide to reverse that one. So this is kind of the magic with the Elektron sequencer, is that each step can be a totally different sound. So what I've done here, on this step here, I have the original sample that we assigned. Here I took 2 different samples that I don't really know what they are, but we're going to hear them. And on the last one, I decided to reverse it. So each step is totally different. And this is the result now. Yeah. So you can actually make pretty decent music without hearing the sequence on Elektron stuff. You can just guess what you're going to input into the sequencer, and it will spit out more or less something that kind of makes sense, and then you could work with that. So I'm actually quite happy with the first thing. So I could go to track number 2. And let's have a look at the same folder structure into the CF card. And I'm going to look at the bass lines in this. Gosh, they're awful. Okay, let's see. Wow, they really didn't, they weren't for me at all actually. Let's go to the music folder. So I load that in. Then I'm going to load other ones as well. Yeah, let's load that one. So I got 2 there. So I chose the first one, which is this one. Yeah. So I put the 1 step at the beginning of the sequence for track number 2. Track number 1 has the beats information. As you can see, there's some tricks splashing, the remixing that we did. And on track number 2, I got the melody content. So. Yeah, the melody sounds really lame. So what we can do is, I would actually like to pitch it down. So let's do that. And then maybe add some different steps here with different filter settings. Yeah. And maybe change the tuning as well. So certain segments like that. I can assign a different sample that I placed into the memory. So maybe from here, I'm going to say, okay, I want to play this melody here. Yeah? Yeah. That's nice. And so you can really mix and match the samples that you assign into the memory within the sequence. And another cool thing that would be nice to do is actually using the delay and maybe setting up like that, and then using the amp, so I can shorten the melodic stuff so that with the delay it will be a bit maybe listenable. And then on the effects number 1, I can use a filter. So the original sound that we loaded in there and what I've managed to crave out, I think it's pretty quick to really change the samples that you loaded in there. It's almost like a sample synthesizer rather than a sample playback machine, because the way that you can process and assign different steps into the sequencer, I think is very, very cool. Now, if you look at the sequencer, I really dig the sequencer in this, because now, for example, what I could do is on track number 2, I could set the sequencer to play half the speed, because I always thought that this actually was a bit too fast, but now let's set it for half the speed. Yeah, this sounds actually better. But there's a clicking here. Let's try to get rid of the clicking, because I don't like that. So because each step can have its own parameters, just on the step that it was kind of clicking, I could assign a bit of attack. And hopefully that will remedy the problem with that. Yes, it did. Great. And then let's unmute the beat. And maybe what we can do is we could actually slow down the beat, the track number 1, the sequence level. So then we're going to hear the loops played a bit more. So let's try that. It didn't really make sense musically, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that the sequencer is very, very cool to have a different time setting for each of them. And also on the Mark II and the Mark I model, we have added the trick conditions to the Octatrack, which the first time they appeared was on the rhythm. What does the trick conditions do? It actually, what you can do is you can say that this step will only play like maybe 50% chance, or it will play 1 out of 2, or 4 out of 7, or 1 out of 8. So with this method, actually, you can really enhance the sequence timing, or actually the sequence length, so to say. Because all our machines have got a 64 step limit. But if I can use the trick conditions, for example, 1 out of 3, then it means that it will trigger 1 out of 3 counters. So then the sequence needs to complete for 3 times until the trigger will be placed. So you're actually, I think we did the calculation, if you set like, yeah, you can go up to 512 steps in theory, but you are limited to, of course, 64 steps. But with this trick conditions, it's very, very cool way. If any of you are into like sequencers, which probably you are as much as I am, you don't know this feature, I really recommend you check the manual out. It's hard for me to explain what it is, and I'll try to show it on the other machines, but it's a really cool method. But let me try to show that. So we have the beat. I'll just play the beat. So for example, the end of it, you're hearing that reverse sound. Well, I don't want that to happen every time. So I could hold that step, go into the menu that has a trick condition value, and I could say, okay, 2 out of 2. You see, so do you guys get it? What happened there? Any questions so far? No. So that is really, really cool, I think. So, and then maybe I could add another trick here, and on this one I can assign a different drum loop, and I'm going to say that will get triggered 3 out of 3. And here I could copy that information, place it somewhere else in the sequencer, which I'm doing now, then set it for 2 out of 3 with a different sample assigned to it. And maybe we can assign, yeah, now you want to assign tricks everywhere. That's what usually happens to me, and then the music gets messy. So we assign another trick here, and then this will come 1 out of 3, and it will be very high pitched. So let's hear the result now. And you also got these re-triggering values, so you can re-trigger the samples that is being played. So let's try that out. Let's see. Autechre, all that stuff. No? So if you're into that type of glitchy stuff, this thing does it amazingly, I think. You know, when I demo it, it sounds a bit daft, but when you start digging into it and make something musical out of it, I think it really, really shines. Another thing with the Octatrack that makes it really special, I think, and kind of on its own, is the fader that you have here. So you can assign any parameter from any track onto the fader. So let's say I want to assign the pitch for the beat that we're playing. So I assign it to the fader now. And it's very easy. You don't have to go into a menu or anything. You just press the button that you want to assign. For example, I want to assign pitch changes when I push the fader this side. Okay? Now, so I hold this button and tell which parameters that it should change. So now it's set for pitch, I can see on the screen. So, and you can also assign many other parameters. Let's try the filter and the delay. And so when I push the fader, I will filter the sound, and I will also assign the sand level to it. So as I push the fader, there will be more sand into the delay, and the filter will get activated, and also the pitch will change. But I can assign many more parameters and many more other parameters from other tracks. So the fader is a really interesting way to morph between huge amount of settings. And because you can do so much, we decided to put 16 setups for the fader. So when you hold the button, you can see here the sequencer buttons are flashing when I press the button. So that means that I can select any of these 16 ones. So this one will have a different setting. You can see this one is green because I have some data there, and the other ones are empty. So and then this is how it would sound like. And what's another thing we could do here is maybe change the delay time as well. So as you're pushing the fader, the delay time will change too. And then maybe assign another sample on track. And we're using only 2 tracks here. So there's a lot more that I can put in here. But the point is that I want to show the features to you guys and hopefully get some questions in the process. Let's assign this sample here, which I always use actually.
I want to be married and have 100 kids so I can have 100 friends and no.
So it was time stretched, and because my BPM is 165, that's why it was talking fast. But if I turn the time stretch off,
I want to be married
so this is
and have 100
how it is
kids.
normally. But I like to use the time stretch as like an effect. So on the playback page, there's a parameter that is called rate, and this is what it does to the sound.
I want to be married and have 100 kids.
And then you could reverse it. It's a bit like, you know, controlling the vinyl type of situation, but you can set that to control the time stretch. So the time stretch becomes like an effect rather than a tool. Yeah. And so if I do that and really slow down the time stretch.
I want to be married and have
Yeah, I really like that you can do this stuff on the machine. And if you apply delay on this, and maybe some big reduction too, always. So from that silly sounding chipmunk sample, you can create ambient tunes. It's pretty cool, I think, what you can do. And another cool thing that I really like about this machine is because it can house very large samples, like 8 minutes or even 10 minutes because you got this compact flash card and it uses as like a memory. So you don't have to load everything into its memory, which you can, but that's too detailed for this session, I think. But you can stream any sample from the card. So you got like a 64 gigabyte card in there, then your memory is 64 gigabytes. That's pretty impressive for a sampler which has all these editing capabilities and a sequencer. So what I was trying to say is, on the playback page, you have a parameter for start. So you select where you want to start the audio playback from. So, so I'm scrolling through a long sample file. I was scrolling through where to start the playback from. And of course, with the Elektron sequencer, I can automate this. So I can put a step here and say, okay, I want to have the start point here, another one there. I'll just do it randomly and see what's going to happen. I don't know. So I just put a lot of random trigs and maybe let's slow down the sequencer. So it's like half the speed of the BPM now. And let's actually put more steps in here. Yes. And you can real-time record parameter changes into the sequence, which I really like doing that. So I press record and play. Now it's flashing. So now the parameter changes will be recorded into the sequence. So I'm going to change the start point. And maybe I could pick another fader setting and assign retriggering to this to the sample. And maybe I can apply delay as I push the fader more. Anybody has questions? No. So I'm going to be the only one talking for 2 hours, right? Okay, all right. So yeah, these are the things that the Octatrack does really cool, I think, in my opinion. Let's actually try to make another tune out of this. Let's go to here, activate another part. Let's set the BPM slower now, I think, and try to pick better samples, because I didn't really like what I was making there. Let's see here. Yeah, okay, so we got this techno folder. I don't know what there is, but let's see. That's well, one is nice, so we put that into the sequencer. And again, this is set for 127, but I'm going to try to play at 107 and see what the result is, because there's the time stretch feature, which is really cool on certain material, because time stretch can degrade the audio, or it can even make it sound better. You have to experiment with it. Yeah, it sounds okay. So that's the track number 1. So we'll go to track number 2, and while it's running, you can assign the samples, browse through the card, resample, change settings. You don't need to stop the machine. That actually applies to all our machines. Everything can be done as the music is playing. So I'm going to browse through some drum loops and find something suitable. There's a sample assigned. There's a really cool feature with the Octatrack funny. Every feature is cool, right? There is a method where it's called one-shot trigger. So if I put a step on the sequence, it's red. I'll put it here so you can see it, okay? It's red. But if I press function and the step again, now it turns yellow. And if I press no, it starts flashing. If I press yes, it's on yellow. So what this means is, if it's flashing, if it's only yellow, that means that this sample will get triggered once. And after that, it will start flashing and it won't get triggered again. So it's a trig where you can activate to be triggered or not, and it's called one-shot triggers. So I place it at the beginning of the sequence. Then I have that sample, and the sample is this one.
You have no idea why I can fly.
Yeah, and then let's do some time stretching on this because it really works well with vocal samples.
You have no idea how high I can fly.
So when this awesome music that we made is playing, at any time the sequence is playing, I could press yes, and that sample will get triggered. So I press yes.
You have no idea how high I can fly.
So with this method, you can actually trigger events in the sequence as you're playing. You just have to pre-program it, or maybe you can do it on the fly also if you're confident with the loops that you're putting in there. Let's try to put... Yeah, let's try this one. Let's see how this sounds. Yeah. I will filter out the whole sound. And at that moment, maybe I could activate the auto sample. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward to make this type of music on this. Very easy. Of course, you know, if any of you are considering to delve into this, at first it may be a bit of a struggle because the amount of features that it offers you is quite a lot. And almost so much that every user that I meet, they use it in a different way. And that is very interesting. The way that I'm showing you here is like the most basic. Basically, you're assigning different samples to the tracks and then sequencing them. But you can actually use the inputs, which I have it hooked up like that here. And you could actually resample on the fly and all that stuff. So let's have a quick look at that. Let me just double check the settings here. Yeah, this should be working. Then if we make sure this is the slices, and then we delete slices here too. Yeah, okay, this should actually work now. So now here I have nothing being played on the Optic track. Because when I press play, you can see that the analog rhythm and the analog 4 are playing. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, they're slayed. So if I pick, let's see what this sequence is. Let's press play and then we hear it. Let's do 1, 2, 3. No, I don't like that pattern. No, not that one. That's nice. And then let's pick up a basic beat here. So when I press play, it plays. Okay. Now, as I said, there is 2 stereo inputs, which the outputs are going in here. So all the audio is summed up on the Optic track. Then the Optic track has got recorders for each of the tracks. So each of the 8 tracks is actually, they can play samples all the time, but at the same time they can record or resample audio while the machine is running. This is kind of like unseen on hardware gear. On a computer you can do it, but the way that the Optic track can record multiple sources as the machine is playing is something, if you're into this stuff, is definitely check it out. I haven't seen it elsewhere on hardware actually. So here, like, we got that sequence running, and then I'll feed it through the rhythm as well. audio that is being fed into it. Like I was showing you before, how you could assign events when you press yes with the one-shot triggers, right? I was just showing you just a few minutes ago. I use that method to actually trigger the recorder buffers now. So when I press yes, instead of triggering a sample, I'm triggering the machine to start recording for 16 steps. That can be set for 4 steps, 8 steps, up to 64 steps. Why 16 steps? Because if I put it for a certain time that the Optic can handle, well, it's a techno machine, so it needs to have 16 steps. Well, it's only a stupid joke, but so when you do it like a 16 step, it will understand that, okay, this thing is at a correct BPM, and it will sound correct to me too. So let's do it. So let's do that. So I press yes now. So I recorded for 16 steps there. And now I'm going to switch to another part, which that part has the buffer playback rather than the through machines that the audio is coming in. It's a bit complicated, but I'll try to explain later on. Let me see if this works properly. Yep. So now I'm hearing it on the machine only, and you can hear it's only 16 steps. But the fun part is I can start remixing this on the fly. Assign effects and make it even stronger and more, and maybe change some tuning on this weird sample. And then maybe apply reverb to it. And what's cool is now I could change which pattern that I'm playing on these machines. So I just go to this. I have no idea if this is going to work, but it should do. Then I'm going to change this one into this pattern. So now when I'm ready, and I've got some assignments here as well, I could switch back to the other part, which will accept the audio that is coming in. And here we go. Musically, it didn't make sense, but what I'm trying to show you is that you can capture sample real time in this thing, like I just did, and I start remixing it. Does anybody have questions about that? Because even I got confused when I was telling about it. No?
No, Cenk, do
yes.
you use the Octatrack also in studio environments? So, or is it more a performance play for you?
The Octatrack actually evolved over years for me. At first, it was like a performance unit, and I would make the whole tunes in this unit. Then, as time progressed, Elektron made even more interesting machines, so I started using them for musical creation. So now, currently, the Octatrack is still the master in the studio for me because of the MIDI capabilities of this, because I can select a MIDI track and my master MIDI keyboard, which is this OP1 here. It could be another MIDI keyboard, so I can control any machine that is in the MIDI signal chain of the Octatrack in my studio. That's great. The second thing that I like using it for is for live performances. This allows me not to bring a mixer to the stage because it has 2 stereo inputs, or they can be configured for 4 mono inputs, or a stereo and 2 inputs. You have a total freedom of assigning the inputs to the tracks. So track number 1 could be a stereo input, track number 2 could be only a mono input from input C, track number 3 could be only mono input from input D, and you feed all these weird sources, whatever you want, and you can resample on the fly, you could add effects to it, and that's the way that I use it currently. So this acts like a mixer, effect processor, live looper, and last but not least, the Q output that I was mentioning, that by holding the Q button, like I do here, and then I say these tracks, and you can see these are flashing, and so the Q output would go into an effects rack module, so the output of that goes into an effects rack module. So if I want to say, okay, I want to put the rhythm into the effects, so I press Q and choose the track which the rhythm is assigned to, and if I want to put the vocal sample or something else, I pick those tracks. So that's the way I use it. It's kind of like more of a mixer and that type of tool. Yeah, and it's not an easy device to get into. I'm totally being honest. But once you do, yeah, the machine talks to you. This applies to all our machines, but this one is pretty special because there's various ways that you can use with it. One feature that I need to actually move on to the next machine because it's 30 minutes now. One feature that I didn't even talk of is you have another type of way to make music on this is pickup machines. It's basically a looper pedal. Imagine like that. So you have a looper pedal in here. And I think this is great for, like, you know, you could hold a chord on your synthesizer, you press it and it loops it for you, like a drone sound. Then you could press it again and play on top. And once you've got this kind of like a loop, then you could actually start adding effects and slow it down, reverse it, time stretch. So it gives a lot of creativity in what type of audio that you put in there. I could quite really dig it. So I said a lot of positive things about the Octatrack. And what is the bad sides? Well, nothing is perfect. The way that you store data on this is kind of a bit complicated. It uses a method called parts. And you have 16 banks, and all of these banks have got 16 patterns. So you have a lot of patterns there. Great. But each of the banks has got 4 parts. So you have to share 4 parts between 16 patterns on each of the banks. And you're going to ask me now, what are the parts? The parts save the settings of the whole 8 tracks, your effects, your LFOs, your time stretch settings, and your crossfader settings. So the parts are very important, as you can hear from what I'm saying. So you need to pay attention to parts. So if you really think of going into this, read the manual about parts. Because if you don't pay attention to it, you could end up losing music because you will overwrite your parts. So that's the only negative thing that I would say about it. I like to say positive things first and then negative because it needs to be understood, especially by you guys. You came all the way, you want to hear the truth, not the marketing talk. So let's look at the analog 4. Does anybody have questions about Octatrack? Yes, great.
I was just too lazy to find it on Austrianhouse.com. Maybe it's an old question, I guess.
Yeah.
What is behind the reason to separate this Effect 1 and Effect 2 unit with this preset of preset effects? Like, why can I don't have a reverb on the Effect 1?
Yeah.
Why are they not flexible?
Yeah, I have a good answer to that. Yes. All the message from all the way from Sweden. The effects that you can have on effects number 1 is delay and reverb. There are few reverb settings like plate, dark.
Yeah.
The reason is those effects are very CPU consuming. So if we have them on effects number 1, that means that we need to actually assign more CPU sources because they can be affected afterwards. Mm-hmm. But there's a way that you can do this. You can sacrifice a track, which is called a neighbor track, which I'm sure you're aware. Then you can have effects after, but you're sacrificing a track, so you're actually having CPU allocated there. So that's the reason it's all about that. It's just how the architecture of the coding is.
Okay, on the track, on the effects unit 1, there are less CPU, less effects.
I wouldn't be able to answer more in depth about it, but it's related to the architecture of the code, how it is. It's just basically not allowed, because if we allowed it, then there would be other problems. I mean, we offer a workaround that you use to sacrifice a track, so yeah, that's all I can say. Another thing that, one thing that I did mention that it has 8 MIDI tracks and 8 audio tracks. Well, one really cool feature is each of the MIDI tracks on the Octatrack has an independent arpeggiator, and this arpeggiator can be freely programmed, much similar to the Digitone and the Analog 4's arpeggiator. This is really cool because each of the arpeggiator settings, such as your speed, range, transpose, note length, they can be locked on different steps. So you can have a crazy arpeggiator running at very fast speeds at the first 4 steps, and then in the next steps it can be very slow. You have a lot of control and madness that you can assign there.
Another question, Cenk. Can I give out the arpeggiator settings of a MIDI out? or it's just internally in the machine?
Sorry?
Arpeggiator, can I give it out via MIDI to another gear?
Of course, the arpeggiator is for the MIDI tracks, so they are meant to be split out into.
Yeah, sure.
But what you should have asked is that, oh, can I use the arpeggiator internally, you know, to trigger samples? You can do by hacking the MIDI, so you put MIDI output back into the MIDI inputs, but that will cause other issues, so you'll have to experiment with the settings. But I've tried it and it works, but it's a bit, not everything goes right, but hey, it's experiment and fun, yeah. So I go to analog 4 then. Now the analog 4, this is, of course, is the Mark II unit. Let's talk about the differences first. The Mark II has an, let's say, has a better overall analog signal path. And the main thing that has changed in this is the overdrive and the first filter. I think it's the first filter that has been updated, but mainly the overdrive has been updated in the sound source. So if I start playing, this is track number 1, and I cleared the sound, so we're hearing only the waveform. It's the default sound. The analog 4, the name suggests, it's a 4-track analog synthesizer. It's 100% analog with digital effects. You also have a CV track. And this is really cool actually on the Mark IIs, is that we now have 2 control-ins, which is meant for CV and expression pedal. We already have a CV out for 4 sources, but now we got control-in as well. So it really talks back and forth to modular gear. What you can do with the control-ins is that you have 2 inputs for CV and expression, well, let's just say CV, and each of those can have 5 parameters. So you can assign 5 different parameters, macro settings, each with their own assignments of how much plus or how much negative you want. It's pretty crazy. Really recommend it. If anybody of you guys are into modular stuff, really check out that feature. It's one of those features that I rarely see in hardware. This one does it really badass. So yeah, let's have a look at the sound. So this is saw waveform, square, and then triangle. Then you have a feedback oscillator. So the oscillator goes into the filter, and then it routes back into the oscillator, making this feedback. And then in that loop, we're kind of hearing what the result is. So now I'm actually turning down the filter, and then you get these awesome low tones. Yeah. And then you could use the overdrive. Yeah, so you can use the feedback oscillator for those type of stuff. Then you have a sub-oscillator, and this is particularly interesting because you have octave 1 down, octave 2, but then you have a 5th as well. This is pretty cool because it's a 4-track mono synthesizer, but by just setting the 5th on the sub-oscillator, you can get these chords out of it. And let's do this. And what's really cool is because the sequencer can have different settings per step, so I can change if I want to have the sub as 5th or not. Let's try to mess around with that. So I'm going to tune this sound into a bass sound. And let's bring up the second oscillator. And let's detune it a bit. To get this nice sound. And let's go to the envelope filter, the filter envelope. Yeah. So it kind of feels like I'm already pressing chords. But if I remove the sub oscillator and just set it for like 2 octaves or just 1 octave down, yeah, both are very nice. But what's even better is that you can mix this in the sequencer. So I put, so I want that on this step. I want to have this right here, and here I want to get rid of the sub oscillator. I have only 1 minus octave, and here maybe I can change the tuning of oscillator to +5, and here, wow, I can assign a different preset altogether. This is a really cool feature of the Analog 4 as well. You can store sounds in this thing, the sounds that you make, and then within the step sequencer, with the parameter locking, you can assign it to each step. So you can make a drum kit using the synthesizer, and save them, and then you can use it as a drum machine, which we should come to that later on. Let's hear the result of the basic sequence I built. And let's set the sequence 16 steps. So let's have a bit more release. And then let's change the envelope. And then let's see here. And then you have the digital effects, which is delay, reverb, and chorus. And this is how they sound like. Yeah, as you can hear, the delay can self-oscillate. And another cool thing is you can route the delay into the reverb as well. So that's what I've done there. There's a little reverb. And let's go back into that. And let's change it because it's still not nice. It should have been nice by now. Yep, that's better now. And like I was showing the trick conditions on the Octatrack, we have the same feature on the Analog 4 as well, which personally I think is even better implemented. It's on the note page, so you have all these pages here, which ranges from the oscillator, filter, amp, envelope, blah blah, and you have a note one. So I hold this step, and I want to have it played every 2 out of 2. So it won't play the first time, but it will play the second time, and then repeats that flow. And let's see, and now let's put another step here with a little vocal filter, and I'll turn down the sound effects for delay. And there's a cool feature that is actually only on, yeah, Octatrack has it as well, but on the Analog 4 and the rhythm, it's really cool implemented, is the parameter slide. So as you were hearing and seeing that I was locking different steps per step, different parameters per step, and you can decide to slide between them. So here, if we look at the sequence, and then, so you can hear there's like a harsh change of the filter. So I can go into the parameter slide menu and select these steps. And now let's hear the result. Yeah, which I think is a lot better than without it. Yeah, so it's a really cool feature that actually stuff. And this feature is not in the Digi line, which breaks my heart, but that's the reality. I can still do it here. Another cool thing that I like doing with the parameter slide is tuning, setting the oscillator tune really high. So I go really high, like +36, which is, and then I do another one, +48. So that's 3 and 4 octaves, I think, higher. And then I set them to slide, the parameter slide, and then, yeah, you can get these. And I'll turn the delay off for those sounds. Yeah, so those are that's how the sequencer works. Of course, you have a note slide. Let's look into that actually. Let's clear the pattern, and of course, many of you will probably like 303 type of sound. Let's try the tuning, something like that. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, and then we set the slide value. But this time I'm going to make a sequence on this, yeah, because straight away it sounds pretty interesting, I think. No, it doesn't. Let's pick up another sequence. Okay, so then let's set the BPM correct. 1, 2, 4. Okay. Let's go. So I record that in. Yeah, so that's recorded. And then I'm going to apply quantize because I don't think I was in time. That's actually a cool thing to discuss now. Mention to you. All our units have sequencers, so they have a quantize method, a quantize feature. I think it works in a really cool way because it's not a destructive quantize. You can apply quantize and remove it back. And you can also decide to input your notes with quantize on or off. And even cooler, this is actually, you can alter the setting real time. So you activate real-time record mode by pressing these two buttons, right? But if I continue pressing this, I see on the screen quantize live record on or off. It's a really cool way to switch back and forth between this. Again, I haven't seen this elsewhere. It's a pretty unique feature. So then let's hear the awesome bass line. And then, yeah. Let's mess around with this. And then we need to turn the polyphony off. Okay. Yeah. So now if I go to the note slide and put some random steps to slide. So you can get these 303 type of sounds. You can also change it a bit more. Yeah. And let's lower the tuning. Yeah. And let's try the overdrive. Because I've been bragging on about, yeah, we're going to do overdrive. So this is how it's. This is why I'm bragging on about which I really dislike, but you can do it. So it's pretty wild the sounds that you can get out of the new overdrive. The Mark 1 doesn't do these things, unfortunately. It's still a great unit. I'm not dissing it at all, not at all, no. But this one has that additional thing. We could maybe talk about what each of the tracks offers. Is like I said, you have two oscillators, and it's followed by two analog filters. One is just a low-pass filter, then there is an analog overdrive, and then there's an analog multi-mode filter. So you got two filters each of the tracks. That's pretty cool because you can really shave off those frequencies. So let's try that. So now the second filter is set for high pass, and I'm going to apply some envelope depth to it. Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty cool stuff to be able to do, I think. Let's go to track number 2. And I was mentioning that you could use this like a drum machine, like triggering different presets per step. So it's pretty easy to do that. You hold the step, and then with this one here, which is a track level, you can decide which preset that you want to assign. So here I have a kick presets. I have no idea if it's going to sound good, but let's hear it. Oh, okay. Let's change this a bit. Okay. No, I don't like that. Let's try to find another kick sound. Yeah, this is good. Okay. So I can copy that and then paste it. Yeah, you can do this type of stuff very easily. And let's. Yeah, this is better now. Yeah, I like this. And because of the locking, parameter locking, I can set a lot of different parameters per step. So let's try to make this note longer. Yeah, here we go. You can hear it. And then let's put some steps like this. They should work properly. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So if I yeah, this is what I wanted to make it the kick. I wanted to make it longer. It doesn't really, the tonality of the drums that I get out of this machine, it doesn't really refer to my liking. But what is interesting is that it sounds wrong in a cool way. That's just the way I think it is. Because I've seen other people that make awesome drum sounds on it. But the way that I get to make it, probably I'm lame at it. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting thing to do with this is the drums. And what I really like doing is assigning different random drum sounds into the sequencer, just like this. I don't even look which sound I'm assigning. And this would be the result. Yeah, it's not bad actually. Yeah. And of course, the sequencer can have different step length per track. So the kick track is 16 steps, but the bass line is 16 steps too. For me, that equals to boring techno, but that's just me. I really like to have the music evolving, and with these machines, I really can do that. One of the things that I like doing personally is maybe setting the step length to 19 instead of 16, and see what happens. Maybe it's, I don't know. Yeah, it didn't really work on this one. Not bad though. But let's hit it for 14, which is the usual thing, and let's bring up the filter envelope so the note is more pronounced. Let's change it 12 steps. No. 6. Yeah, 6 always works. Yeah. So that's one of the ways to do it. In this case, it didn't really work out, but I've seen it work before. And another thing I really like doing is the trick conditions. So I would hold multiple steps like this, and maybe assign a 50% chance of triggering the steps that I'm holding. And I will do more here. And then assign it maybe 67% chance. Anybody has questions? No? Yeah? Okay. So those are the ways to come out of the, you know, the looping thing that I always try to find ways to avoid, because I like the music to evolve and change as you're playing. But that does take some time to, you know, think about what you're playing and how you're going to program it. Let's go through some of the presets, see what I don't know what. Yeah. So now, another thing that we've added for the Mark II machines is the quick performance knob. God, I love that word. It's amazing. Quick performance knob. So with this one, maybe some of you users, does anybody use Analog 4 here? Yes. Okay. So you know the performance macros. But for the rest, in the Analog 4, you have performance macros, and you have 10 of them. And each of these performance macros can have 5 different parameter changes that you can assign. So with one knob change, I can change the filter, the delay time, the decay, and overdrive. So you can set up these controls when you're on the performance page, which is button is located here. Then you have access to a lot of parameters just by 10 knobs. So that's actually 50 parameters that you can change by 10 knobs. And what we added here for the Mark II is the quick performance knob. So any of these 10 performance macros that I've been talking about just now can be assigned to this. Pretty much the fader is. That's what really kind of the inspiration came from. So then, in this case, well, if I play back the pattern, I'm changing the hi-hats, okay? So then I could hold this button and go to another thing, and yeah, this one is changing at something else, so I like it like that maybe. Then I go to maybe this performance is for the Mark IIs is that I can mute the performance macros, which you can't do that on Mark I. So now if I press function and this green button here, then I can mute the changes. So I can go back to how it was. You see, so I mean, it doesn't sound really musical, but what I'm trying to show here is that you can change the music drastically how you want. In the simplest form, the way that I set this pattern to be played is to change the which one was this? It was the drum part, but then you can assign it to any other settings too. Let's have a look at other. Yeah, let's try this one. There's quite a few parameters that change only with one knob. Now when I'm ready, I can just drop it back in. And while I'm doing this, I have many other parameters here too. And then I can mute it. And if you're really playing trippy music and strange stuff, then you could just maybe unmute this. And maybe change it a bit while it's muted, and then unmute, and then change it. Yeah, so you've got a lot of ways to change how you want to perform on the pattern that you have there. Let's try some other pattern. Nah, I don't like that. Let's see. Actually, and then that's a cool thing to talk about. Is the unit comes with a lot of presets. I think it's 512, and these have been actually remade for the Mark II. I don't know about Mark I, but yeah, the Mark II has got some kind of better presets, I think. And what's cool is that you can play it polyphonically. This is what I wanted to say. So the way that it was set up until now, it was a 4-track mono synthesizer, but I could set the poly config to play all 4 tracks at the same time. Yeah. Let's clear that. Yeah. So you can press chords. So you can play it polyphonically if you want, and it's great for actually pad sounds, because you have really cool effects and you have the analog sound, so you can make stuff like this actually, which I really, this is the stuff that I'm really into. And I didn't change any of the oscillator settings, it was just I made it sound default, then I just played a bit with the envelope and the filters. So if I activate the sub oscillator, like 2 octaves down, let's do 1 octave. That's a pulse width modulation. So it can sound awfully rich actually if you use all 4 tracks in a polyphonic manner. But then that's all I could do on the machine. So it is kind of limited when it comes to poly mode, and this I would say is the negative part of the machine. But you know, I've been showing all the positive sides. But for polyphonic stuff, you would have to record this, bounce it onto something, and then continue from there. It's totally possible. Though the polyphonic can be set so that track 1 can be monophonic, and track number 2 can have 3 voices assigned, or in another scenario, track number 1 and 2 are monophonic, and 3 is a 2 voice, which is the number 3 and 4 assigned to that track. So you have a bit of flexibility there.
So you can have a sequence basically with different parts, and some of the parts can be polyphonic and doing a monophonic.
Yes, you can do that. The voice can be stolen from each other as well.
So doing the sequence is gone.
Yes, you can do that.
That's great.
It has actually a very sophisticated poly sharing or voice allocation. That is the word. Yes. Currently it's set to reset, but you have modes such as rotate, reassign, and unison. Unison is really cool. Let's check that out actually. So now it's on unison. So without it, so if I only have one voice, this is it. But the unison is this. But then if you activate the sub, then if you have the overdrive, and let's try the second oscillator too. So boost modulation too. So yeah, you can get, as I said, really rich sounds on it. But in that setting, I was using the whole voices basically on one single note. But that's unison for you. Another thing that I didn't mention is the external inputs that you have. You can configure it so that it's a stereo input or 2 mono inputs, and you can apply the analog circuitry, meaning the filters and the overdrive, or just the digital effects. So you've got 2 ways to use it. I think it's really cool, the inputs on this. I personally use it with the Rahmen Boutique 03, the remake. I can't afford the original, so I need to get the remake. So that goes in here, and I use the reverb and delay, and I'm really happy with that. It's really, really good, I think. And then you have the USB for the famous overbridge. It will come later on. With overbridge, you'll be able to multi-track all your 4 tracks into the computer. And this applies to rhythm, digiline, the digitakt and the digitone, not the octatrack. Octatrack won't have overbridge.
How you trick the TB03 with a trick signal?
Yes, I do that. Yeah, that's another feature that I really like of the Rahmen Boutique one. It's going to sync in, so you can sync any sequencer with pulses from a modular or from this unit, which has a CV sequencer, like I said before. You have 4 CV sources. So one of them I use it for gates. So each time I send a pulse into the Rahmen Boutique 303, its own sequencer advances to the next step. And with trick conditions and with different step lengths of the sequencer, I can send really weird tricks to the sync-in. So as a result, the playback of the bass line will be in sync, but it will always evolve, because each time the pattern loops, it's spitting out a different type of sequence, because it's not a regular sequence. It's not in sync as in a, how to say, yeah, they are playing in the same speed, but they're playing at the different parts. That's how I could put it all. Yeah. So the time has moved to the rhythm, which is actually my favorite machine out of all of these. Yeah. Especially this model, because the Mark I doesn't sample, and this one does. So that is the first difference that I like about this. And I connect my MS-20 into this, and I love that I can pick those sounds coming out from that thing and into this. For example, let's see here, I think it's this one, or was it this? Yeah. No. Was this? Yeah. So yeah, the sounds that you hear, let's see here. Yeah, this is the MS-20 actually. I can hear, you can see here, yes. And the triggering is a result of the LFO. So if I slow down the LFO, yeah, so you get the idea of what it does, the LFO either. So the sound is actually just this. And if I open the filters as well, that's what I sampled from the MS-20. And also, I'm not playing it correctly. This is the whole sample that I sampled from it. Yeah, but if I now it's correct. So it's just basically holding one note, other notes as well. But either way, then I treated it so that it sounds like this, which is I think much more funky. And anything that you have in the machine, they can be played chromatically. It's a drum machine. The analog rhythm is a 12-track, 8-voice analog drum machine with sampling capabilities. So it's a digital and an analog drum machine with the Elektron sequencer, which is really cool, I think. So, like I was saying, any sound that you put in it, it can be played chromatically. This applies to the internal analog engines and everything else that you put into the machine. I think it's great for that. So yeah, let's try to play this pattern. And here I have the quick performance knob, just like on the Analog 4 that I was showing you. It does pretty much the same thing. You have, on this one you have 12 macros, and each of the macros can have various settings of changes. And in this case, I'm changing the filter. And then when I'm ready, I can drop in the beats with the other stuff. Yeah, and this thing sounds so good in my ears. I really like it. It's Tract. And the cymbal engine is really good as well. I'll trigger that. This cymbal is it's almost even better than the original Roland cymbal in my ears, because I got much more better control. I really like this analog cymbal that the good guys back in Sweden came up with.
Is there any change from the sound Mark II or Mark I? So in fatness, or is it the same circuit?
It is. It's the same circuit. The Analog 4 has got more substantial changes, such as the overdrive and some changes on the filter, I think. But the overdrive is major. On this one, there isn't any. But what I can say is, I don't really remember the specs, but I'm pretty sure that the outputs are slightly better. But better is, I can't really explain what is better, so it's best to check it out on the website, because you can see all the specs there. There's a slight difference there, and the actual difference between Mark I and Mark II on this one is the sampling, like I'm saying many times, because I really like that. And the cymbal engine, yeah, let's have a look at that actually, because I so like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the cymbal engine, so this is how it sounds like by neutral. Yeah, it's pretty boring, but you have like 3 levels of what makes the cymbal sound. So I'll turn them all down, and this is one of the timbres. We call them components. You have 3 components. So that's one of them. That's my favorite tone. And there's number 2. So this is like the higher, and you have the beginning of the sound. So you've got a very good, nice control of how you want to mix them. And for me, that is really cool. Then you have the different types of the cymbals. So you have a B, you have a different tonality, C, and then D. And of course, this can be, the tuning can be changed. That was weird. Yeah. I never use those. Basically, I just like to set it up like this. And you can see that, you can hear that the sound is swelling, and I'm using the LFO as like an envelope for the level of the sound. The LFOs on our machines, they can be used in various different ways. The first way is just a simple thing, something that goes up and down, and you assign it to a parameter. Another thing that they go really fast. so they can be at audio rates. So I'm going to really crank it up. There you go. So it's a sound design tool as well. So I'm affecting, modulating the level parameter really fast. And I get these weird results. So I can assign this to the filter, for example. Let's try that. What was that sound? I don't know. And then we set the filter. Here we go. Yeah. Oops. So you can do those type of stuff. And the third way that I think find it very useful is that they can be used like an envelope. Because each of the LFOs, this applies to all our machines actually, they have the trig mode. So when you trigger the sound, the LFO gets trigged. So if you slow it down, you can use it like an envelope like this. It's really, really cool, I think. Let's check that out. Okay. Anybody here that uses the rhythm? Okay, so there's a few of you. Did you guys hear about the dual VCO?
Where is it?
Where is it? I have it. That's the part. Yeah, I have to apologize. Yeah, it's been a long coming, but it's coming. But now we can actually play around with it. So on the analog rhythm, you have each of the tracks offers you an analog circuitry, which is where the drum sound is made. The analog drum sound is made. And you can choose various methods. So let me clear this track. So this is the default sound, default starting sound for bass drum plastic. If I go to silky, which is another method, this is what I get. Then there's a sharp. So you have all these different methods, and these are all analog. And I have 8 parameters on each of them to really twist the sound. And this is the FM one. Let's check that out. This is the most bizarre one, I think. So you do this, and then maybe sweep down. Didn't hear that one before. But yeah, so you get the idea. It's more than a kick engine here. So if I clear it, return the default of the FM bass drum, it's more like a kick. So what I'm saying is that these engines, the analog circuitry, is designed to make kick sound or drum sounds. Like, you know, it has like a sharp ramp at the beginning, so it's a pop sound, and then followed by other parameters depending on the engine you chose. And eventually we came up with, okay, I don't have it in. Well, that's a shame. Wait, this unit should have that. I apologize. This is not the correct OS, so I must have changed the OS. Oh, that's very unexpected. I was really expecting to show this. Yeah, I can't show that.
How is it sounding?
Bow. Wow, I'm really, yeah, that's kind of a blow. Anyway, so we can have a look at the different engines. The one that I really like is, I think it's this one here, the plastic, because here I can, yeah, this is the, so I can choose the mode type. It's like a ring modulator, if I understand correctly. Type of sounds, and so each of the tracks offers you an analog engine, like I was telling about. Then it's followed by a sample engine. So you have the analog voice and also the sample, which is digital. So you're mixing analog and digital at the same time, which I really dig that. So let's pick up a piano sound and load that in. Try changing the, yeah. So it's like I have the piano and the kick at the same time, and I can change the piano tuning and maybe reverse it. Yeah, this is really good for this type of stuff, and This is one of those things that I haven't seen it elsewhere so far on hardware devices such as this. It's a very unique thing to be able to have true analog voice and a digital sample at the same time. On a digital sample, you can use a bit reduction. Yeah. So let's try to make something out of this. So I put one step at the beginning, and then let's slow down the BPM, because this is the master here. Let's slow it down a bit more. Yeah. So that's like that's track number 1 there. What I can do here is use the LFO in a creative manner, and that could be, I could assign the start point of the sample and set it for random. So each time the sample is triggered, it will start from a random position of the piano sample that I have loaded in there. Set it to like this, and set it like that. Let's see. These are the things that makes it really shine for me. Actually, I really enjoy that. Still bummed out about this engine though. God, okay. And then let's add the hi-hats. For example, let's go to the hi-hat engine, and we have bass, drum, snare, rim shot, clap, the toms, hi-hat, and cymbal, and all of these have got specific analog engines for each of these tracks. So you have a specific hi-hat engine, which is this, but I will clear the sound. This is how it is by neutral. I like this one. This is the one that I like it actually. Like this. Yeah, something like that. And put some steps in like this. And of course you can re-trigger it, which is very cool. So you can like hold the step and then press up and down to adjust the re-triggering value. Yeah, you can hear it a bit there. Yeah, so on the re-trigged hi-hats, I'm going to open the filter a bit so it can be audible. Yeah. Length to 32 steps for the hi-hats. So, and then by doing it like this, what I did is at the end of the first bar for the hi-hats, because the hi-hat stops and I locked the filter value, like kind of like at the parent value of 104. On the second bar, I assign it to value of 86, so that I'm going to have different tones of hi-hats at the end of each bar. And for me, these are the things that makes the music interesting. And then the next one is going to be, yeah. And then let's see here. So we go to the snare track, and then, yeah, put some reverb on it, and then maybe change the filter setting. Yeah. So like I was saying to you, you have the analog engine, the sample engine, so you have analog and digital, they're combined, and then they both go through a multi-mode analog filter and an analog overdrive. So basically, when I think about it, this machine becomes like the only analog sampler on the market right now. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to brag about. Not that I care about analog, but it's an important thing to keep in mind. The samples that you capture, you can treat them in the analog domain, and the overdrive, which I think is thanks to the analog circuitry, it sounds really good to my ears. So let's tune the hi. Yeah, so now each of the snare I can have a different filter frequency. So I select the filter frequency on the LFO and assign the random waveform. So each time it hits, it will have a different frequency. Yeah. And what I can do with the trick conditions, I can have like a little fill at the end of the sequence, like that. And I could say that it comes every 5 out of 5. So it's not even 4 out of 4, so it's every 5th bar, which that messes with people's heads, and I think that's what people really enjoy when listening to this type of music. And then, let's see, we go to the next track, and this time I want to pick up just a sample. So on track number 3, the rimshot track, I'm just going to try to find a sample. Let's see. What is that? What? Ah, okay. So this was the OP1.
Fuck you.
Yeah. Could maybe use this. Yeah. And reverse it, of course. Play it chromatically. It's and some filter. So I'll use the bandpass filter. And I may add some reverb and delay to this. So let's see if it goes well with the beat. I have no idea. Yeah, it does. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this track sequence length to 4 bars. Okay, so then I'm just going to record in what I was playing there. So I'm going to hit record and play, which is the real-time recording, and then tap in the beats. Yeah, you heard the fill, which came in a weird time, and that's really cool. So as the machine is playing, I can add different steps into the sequence, and that's the cymbal engine, really cool. So I'm going to record the parameter changes. Nice to put in these type of chords in and then process them in the analog domain. So let's try it. So this is the filter. So I have a digital effect and an analog filter and an analog overdrive, and I can play it chromatically. Yeah, these are really the features that comes to my heart actually. And then so in the sequence I could maybe put a trick here of that sound, and this is how it sounds like. And then we have a bass tom track, which it's definitely worth mentioning because you get some really nice toms out of this. So by default, it's this. This is totally analog, and you can tune it down and get these awesome kicks out of it easily. And if you want to layer another kick with it, you can, because you have the sample engine in the same track. So I'm going to choose this kick. So this is the sample that I chose. No, not this one. We need a kick sound. Come on. Yeah, this is normal 909. Well, it says 909. And then I'm going to layer it up with this bass tone. So you can get really good kick results using it like this. And then maybe tune down just the sample. And they actually go a bit weird. You have the bit reduction for the kick maybe. Yeah. Another cool thing is the analog rhythm has got analog processing at the end of the signal chain, which is you have a distortion and a compressor, and they're analog too. And they're pretty cool. Let's check them out. So this is the distortion. That was the distortion, and now the compressor. The compressor is already working, but so this is without the compressor. What is that? Okay, so if I feed the compressor in, those things at the end of the signal chain to really beef it up. I think that is the reason why I like the machine, is because first thing is that I sample into it, so I don't need to carry all the gear, and the second is I can really polish it up, and it's 12 tracks, so it gives me a lot of freedom, and I can actually layer up samples and analog stuff on the same track. Another cool thing that I want to show before I move on is, because it's a sampler, you can load in like a single cycle waveform and it will sound like this. Okay, let's remove the tone because it's only playing once. But if I set the loop on, because you can loop the sample, so now it becomes like a wavetable, well, kind of a wavetable synthesizer. So then you can play it chromatically. Then when you have the filter in there, so you can create bass lines out of this. Let's do that in this pattern. Yeah, so you can hold the step and say, okay, that note here, that one here, that there. So you can quickly make up a, this is gonna sound bad, and then maybe do this really high. Yep. There you go, you got a really cool way to come up with bass lines. And then if you start using the trick conditions like I was doing on analog 4, holding multiple steps just randomly, random music is good. The developers won't agree, but it is good. So then you hold some steps and then apply different, yeah, here we go. And then put kick on this. It almost sounds like there is this guy in back playing this weird bass. Yeah. And put some cymbals. So you can do all that stuff, and as you saw, I was just messing around with it, and for my ears it was sounding pretty good. So this is a really capable machine, and I like it that it gets really hot. It is getting pretty hot now. It's very nice. It's the killer feature. You can't find it elsewhere, you know. Yeah. I mean, these ones don't get that hot because they are not analog. They don't have all the circuitry inside. They run on a little chip with the genius of coding. So that was the algorithm. I'll move on if you guys don't have any questions. Yes?
Just a question, yeah. You know, as the Digitrack, probably the other machine, you can make a pattern, save it, and reload it. This is the same thing also for the rhythm as well?
Like?
Can you just save the pattern or and reload it up, change it and reload it afterwards?
Change all the feature.
Yeah. Is that limited by the analog engine?
So I think what you're asking me is you want to change the parameters and reload to the settings.
Like the Digitag, like.
Yeah, because they have a control all mode.
Yeah.
These don't.
Oh, okay.
It's not a limitation of the analog engine. It's just that it's how it's designed.
Right.
What I can say is let's try to save this this piece of music here. So that's saved now. But you were saying that let's change the parameters, okay? So this was the bass line. So I'm gonna make it like this. And then the kick is really high. So it's kind of changed a lot, but now I can hit no, and then the kick it will load back. Like this. So
that's sort of very close to what you can.
It's very close, it is, but the saving methods on the analog 4 and rhythm, they work differently to the Digitags, and maybe that is something that's a negative dimension here is, or maybe a positive thing, how you look at it. For me, it isn't that nice. Is that the pattern is written into the memory as you're changing it. You can save the pattern and reload it back, but yeah, it's a weird way of doing it. But the best way to do it is that you can reload the kit, which is the sound settings. But reloading the sequence is a bit weird. I can't get my head around it.
It's definitely easier to do it on a digital engine.
I don't think it's related to digital or analog. It's just they're made like that. Because I mean we got the parameter locks, so each step can be a totally different analog circuitry settings. So we can do that, but they're just not built in that way. So it's a bit trickier to do those tricks on the analog machines compared to digital. However, you have the quick performance knob, so you can actually change a lot of parameters by the performance functions. Because I didn't actually dig into this, is that when I click the performance knob here, you see the paths have changed. You see, now it's green. So these mean that there is these are pressure sensitive now, and the more I press, the lights change. So here I can assign different parameters to each of these paths, and I could press them and really change the sound of what I'm doing. Let's try it actually. Yeah, so there's already some kind of changes happening to these. So it's playing, and now. So now if I let go, and it goes back to it. So I could assign another one here that will change everything. I'll assign so that everything goes higher in pitch, which is very easy to hear. So the bass tom track goes higher. This one does, and these ones do. Let's set that up. It's very similar to the fader. You basically assign macros to change the sound, and then let's hear it. Didn't really do it. And then let's try this. Yeah. And then. So when you're ready, you can just reload back.
So like an expression mode.
Yeah, there you go. It's just how they're designed, because the machine is clearly capable of reverting to how the sound was. It's just that how you approach it is different. And in this method, you have something that is different, and in its own right, it's really cool, because each of the paths can have a totally different setting. In the way that I set it up, this one was the filter, and this one just pitches everything up. So, and then you could combine them, so you got 12 of those. That's pretty neat, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have the scenes mode, where those changes are applied instantaneously. They are not pressure sensitive. So you just tap it, and then the change happens. This is great for changing the samples, actually, because you can assign different samples into the scenes or the performance now. Yeah, makes me want to do those things, but I need to move on actually. Yes, already too late.
Just one question.
Yes.
Any plans on sample transfer too for MK1 machines?
Of course, yeah. That yeah, it's kind of an apology that I would say, because it isn't nice to support Mark II without supporting Mark I. Actually, I stand by that. That's not nice. So we are working on the Mark I version, and that will be out pretty soon. Actually, I've seen it working. Currently, it kind of works, but it is not as
stable.
It's just not smooth compared to the Mark II. The Mark II works really good with the sample transfer app. But the Mark I will get it too. It's I've seen it working. It just needs a bit more time. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
The Laster function actually, if you go from the master itself in halftime, can only go with the master in halftime. Is it somehow possible to do it on several tracks with the timing? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't.
You can adjust, if you use the last step function of the page button.
Yeah, you mean like having different step lengths?
Like 10/16, but you wanted to have it in halftime for this only track, for example.
That's why the Octatrack is the best sequencer we've ever made. That is exactly why. Like I said at the start, that is. I wish that sequencer applied to all our machines, but it isn't. The Octatrack does what you're asking, but this one doesn't. Yeah, and I'm not really sure if it will be implemented or not. I shouldn't say anything because I don't know. I hope to see it one day. It would be great because I really like those features, because not only half or double time, you can do 3/4, 3 out of 4, or the other settings that I can't remember now. And then yeah, they just allow you to make crazier music. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to this one here. Yeah. So we got the Digitact and the Digiline here in the camera. Yeah, these are our latest creations, and we wanted to make it a bit more accessible and, you know, a bit more, definitely cheaper and totally digital, so that you know, you can make it actually cheaper for that reason. And it's been really good for us, I think, and I'm really happy with the machines myself. I really like working with these, alongside with these, but these are becoming really, yeah, because of they offer a bit more limitation. They are more limited than these, but that's not an issue once you start digging into it, I think. So the Digitact is an 8-voice drum sampler. So you can sample anything into it with the left-right inputs. One thing to note here, that the Digitact is a mono sample playback. That doesn't mean that the machine is mono. It is stereo, but the sample is played back in mono. The effects are stereo. You can pan them left and right, the 8 tracks that are available. So it's not going to sound mono at all. I wanted to make that clear because on the internet, people do misunderstand that. I've read it. They claim that the machine sounds mono. Well, I don't know if there was ever a stereo drum kit. There wasn't, right? So, and these are the sounds that I have in here. So you can load in any sounds into it. So I have this sound here, and this, yeah. Yeah, you can see it there. Yeah, that's very nice. Okay. Let's, I don't know what I have. I think I'm gonna load the latest sound pack we released for these, actually. I don't know if you follow our channels, but we release a lot of sound packs for these, and the latest one we released was with Dabei. He's a cool artist, I like his stuff. Indeed, yes. So let's unmute these. So I have 8 tracks, and in this mode I have muted them, and then only these 2 are active. Yeah. So here I have a vocal sound that yeah, I could maybe pitch it down, or maybe pitch it up, yeah. And I maybe shorten it. Yeah. And then I could unmute the kick and snare now. And you can do the screen triggering stuff. So on its own, it can sound really monstrous. You can do all that stuff. But what I really like doing is, let's go to this pattern. Is like I said, these machines have the control all feature, so you can change the all tracks at the same time. So let's check this out, okay? And then, so if I hold this button here, I can say, okay, I want to tune everything up, and everything will be tuned up. But everything is, and maybe I could filter everything down, and maybe I'll reverb to everything. Hell, I could even change the old samples assigned for the 8 tracks by holding still the same button and changing the sample parameter. So it's totally different samples assigned to it now. But so you can reverse everything too. And what's cool is when you're ready, you can reload back to where you were. And that's the question that you were asking, and it's better implemented here. So all I do is press function and no, and back to where I was. This is a really cool way to perform. For example, let's try to make it a bit more musical. Yeah, and then you can reload back into where you were, or just change the samples altogether. Really a cool way to, for me, it's really satisfying to hear what is going on. Actually, it's really cool because I can't actually do this anywhere else. It's kind of a unique feature to do actually. Yeah, this is kind of weird now. Yeah. So I don't know if I would have actually made this type of sound that I actually personally enjoy intentionally. So that's kind of a big part of the electronic experience, I would say. You come up with happy accidents that I always do personally, and that's is really special for me, I would say. And let's go to an empty pattern and yeah, look at what each of the tracks offers. So each of the tracks offers you a sample playback engine. That's the first thing that you start with. And then you could change which sample that you want to have. And so you can see it on the screen, which is really cool way to do it, I think. Yeah. And if you put these type of melodic sounds, you can play them back chromatically. And of course, this machine can't be polyphonic. You have 8 tracks, which they are only monophonic voices. This is not a machine to press chords. However, you can sample chords into it, of course. Nothing stops you from what you want to put in there. Hell, you can actually copy this track into the rest of the 8 tracks and build up a chord in the sequence and resample that. That's another workflow. I've never done that, but it's possible. So you can play chromatically, and you can do all that. And then, so we looked at the, and actually let's load up a different sample. So I'm going to go into my memory here, and we're going to record it, and I'm going to pick up this piano sound. I really like showing this example. I recorded this from YouTube. It was actually one of the advertisements. It was about piano education type of thing. And I was like, wow, this sounds really good, so I had to find the advertisement again. But I found it, and I sampled it. And so if I set the start point, assign the start point to the LFO, because each of the tracks offers you the sample playback, the filter, which is a digital filter. It's got 2 modes, low pass and high pass. Then you have a digital overdrive, an amp, delay, reverb, and the LFO. So that's what you have per track. These are, aren't as in depth as you would see on the other machines, I think. The rhythm is kind of similar to what this thing offers, but the rhythm offers you the analog engines, which take it up to the whole different territory, I think, in my opinion. It adds a lot to the flavor. So now I have assigned a start point to the LFO, and I wanted to set the playback to repeat, to looping. So it's looping, and on the screen I have these really nice ambient type of sounds. Yeah, the clicking is annoying, yes, but it is there. It's not a granular synthesizer, so you don't have a feature to smoothen that out, but you have a filter, so you can actually just remove the high ends of the clicking. So now it kind of sounds a bit better. And what's cool is you can apply the reverb and delay to this. The delay. And if I change the length of the playback, so you can get these really nice tones out of it, I think. This mode was forward looping. You can also do reverse looping. So you can loop in reverse formats, like this, rather not like this, but like that. Yeah. And this is the shortest length of the playback that I can have, and it just turns into this bizarre sound. But if I just this for me, this is a really cool way to come up with these type of bizarre sounds, and spend hours and experiment with it. Let's have a look here. Oops. Yeah, and this type of sounds, I really like it when you can pitch it down. It's very noisy, so we'll filter it a bit. Some delay and reverb, always, yeah. It's like sugar in tea. And then, so I put a one step at the beginning of the sequence and set the BPM to, let's see, 112, yeah. And now if I press play, yeah, it's kind of a nice loop actually. So we play, you can see on the sequence. Yeah, and then I could go to the kick track and maybe try to make up a beat. So let's see. Yeah, this is an okay sound. So I just put that there, and I'm going to use the digital overdrive. It kind of like it's just. Yeah, it puts the sound a bit forward. It is not an aggressive overdrive, but it really beefs up certain elements in the sound. So that's with it, and this is without it. Yeah. And then let's see, we go to the hi-hat track, and let's select hi-hat number 5. There's 8 hi-hats in this pack. So now if I just put some steps in like this, okay, that sounds boring, but what I can do is I can assign the sample selection parameter to the LFO. So it can be randomized or modulated with an LFO. The analog rhythm does this too. The sample engine is more or less, it's very similar to the rhythm. And this one does that feature. I think it's really, really cool. So let's try to hear this, see what happens. Where is it? Ah, here we go. But the samples are played back so long, so I'm going to use the envelope to shorten the sound. Yeah, that's better now. Yeah, so without any hard work, you end up making groovy stuff. It's almost cheating. What the hell? Yeah. And then we go to the snare track and let's put some snares in. Yeah. And pitch it down, of course. Yes. I really like that. Let's see. Ooh. Yes. That's one of the things that I really dig about this machine, is that I can see the waveform on the screen, and you have the start and end points. I can exactly see, you can't see it there, but here I can, that's exactly where I want the snare to start from. So this was the original sample. There was too much, it's too loose. So what I did, I just raised the start points a bit. So it's a bit tighter now, because I'm not playing from the beginning, I'm playing from the middle of the recording. So I can actually extend that and go towards the ending of the recording. So just with this, you're actually having, with one sample, you end up with a lot of samples, because the parameters allow you to drastically change the tonality of the samples. So I like it like that. Yeah, so I put that little fill, and of course it's a 16-step bar, but I don't want that to come every time. That would be pretty lame. So again, the trick conditions feature, which I explained like 2 hours ago at the first thing, is really magical, because I hold these steps and say, okay, you come in every 4 times. And they only come in at the 4th bar playing. So now, not this time, now they will. And maybe I could have like a little re-trick on one of the steps. Let's hear that. Yeah. So now let's go to the kick track, because one kick just at the beginning of each bar is kind of a bit boring, I think. So what I like doing is, again, using the trick conditions and applying maybe 25 or 33% chance. So I place one trick there, and then I copied that. You do it by holding step and then copy. Then you paste it into the places that you think it would sound good, which is usually random for me. And then maybe change the tuning, like maybe +5 or -3, +2 on this. And then let's see what the result is. Mind you, these are set to percentage. They are not gonna come in every 2 out of 3 or 4 out of 2. They've got 33% chance of triggering it. So the kick track is random. Basically, the drummer does it whenever he feels like it. Yeah. Let's listen to it for a while. Yeah. Yeah, this is really cool. And you can actually apply swing. Let's hear that. Can do that. And one thing that I really dig about the Digiland is how to save your music. The other machines are a bit more complicated, and that's I could say it as like a con thing. All I need to do is press function and yes, and that's it. It's saved, and even the pattern is saved, because that was some kind of question that you were asking. On these machines, the sounds are saved differently, and the pattern is always saved as you put in notes. But on these ones, you have a much better control. And the icing on the cake is that, man, these machines can finally have BPM setting per pattern, which I find it personally, as a music maker, really lacking on the other machines. I'm not here to just tell how good these machines are. I'm telling you the truth. It's very important to be aware of these things when you're looking into buying these things. So if you're using these machines, you need to keep track of your BPM on your patterns. You can do this by naming your kits, because you can name the kits 120 BPM or 90 BPM. I do that because, as I said, this is my favorite machine of all time, but unfortunately it doesn't save the BPM. So my method is to name the kits as the BPM that I would like, and that has really worked for me. So I would recommend you guys that if you're gonna use this machine to do it. But for these, you just save it and you're done. Then let's have a look. Let's add one more. Yeah, maybe this will work. Let's see. Go in the chromatic mode. Yeah, something like this. Okay, this is better. So I'm going to set the sequence length to 4 bars for this track that I'm planning to write a melody in. So something like this. Yes, yeah, and then so I press record and play, and you're in real-time recording mode. Then you can tap in your notes. Now I can change the whole tracks and make it something weird. Let's try doing that. So I can maybe put the filter now. And then maybe reverse everything. And maybe use the envelope for the filter. Applies to the BPM, not the BPM, sorry, well it does apply to the BPM, but even the pattern. So let's choose, this clap sound. Yeah, this is okay. So then it's playing, and then I decide to put some claps in. And then do all this weird stuff with it. And then I just reload it. The clap track is gone. This is really a cool way because I am reloading the sound and the pattern settings. This is really important, and these machines really do that really well. On these ones, you have to think a bit more about that. The Digitact is also on a MIDI sequencer, so you have 8 audio tracks and then 8 MIDI tracks. So 16 tracks altogether. You can sample into it as well. One about the sampling, let's try resampling. That's something that I don't actually do much often. So I've set the internal to be resampled. So I arm the recorder. Now it's armed. So when I press play, it will start recording this beat. So I'll capture for one loop. Okay, so I pressed the stop, and then let's go to another pattern, and then we're going to change the track with this, and then so this is what I sampled here. Yeah, and here I can actually, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but it's very detailed to slice, cut, and save your samples here. And it's not destructive. What I'm trying to say is not destructive is, let's say I'm just going to go all the way down. Oh, you can see it a bit on there. So I'm just picking the first bit of the sound, for example, this. So let's say this is an awesome sound that I really like, and I just want that. So I can actually do it, trim it, then I could save it. Then after I save it, I can go back, and the full thing is there. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to sample in this thing, what you can do is you can have your drum kits, for example. Then you activate sampling, and then you hit all the drum sounds. And after you've recorded all the hits, then you can go in there and, okay, this is the kick, I save it. This is the snare, I save, hi-hats. This applies to synthesizers or any sound source. So I really like the way that this thing samples and saves into the memory. The method is totally the same on the rhythm. It actually was ported from here into there for the Mark II. And this is a really cool way to do it. So I'm going to save this, this resample loop because I wanted to show you that it sounds pretty cool when you pitch it down. Let's do that. Yes. Yeah, do all these type of stuff. Some bit reduction maybe. Some overdrive again, of course. Some filtering. Yeah. These are the really interesting things that you can do inside the machine, because as you saw, I didn't have any external input. So imagine when you actually connect your phone and go onto YouTube or Spotify or anything else that you want to sample from. It's a very fun and a creative process to work with actually, this thing. And this is a USB output, and the dreaded weighted overbridge will be available for it too. I'm waiting for it too. It's really going to be nice because, as I said, and I was playing with it, and I really like what I make on this machine personally, and I'm really looking forward to record onto a computer multi-track, because it's 8 tracks. And right now I have a stereo output. There is no analog output. The analog machines that have that, they're really good with the individual outs because, you know, it's a bigger case, it's a more expensive platform, yada yada. But on these ones, you know, we need to rely on such external technology to be able to do it, apply it in studio scenarios. And that is coming, and it's going to be really good. I wish I could show it to you today, but we're not there yet, but it will come. Is there any questions before I move to the guitar? No? Okay.
Is it a different reverb which is in there? There are always rumors it's a brilliant reverb on the Digitakt.
Yeah, it's
so
okay.
different.
Let me.
Or is it more or less the same on all?
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but what I'm under the impression that it is from the Analog 4 and the rhythm reverb, but it has been a bit altered here to fix into this type of machine. But yeah, I agree, it sounds really good. I always use it. It's always drowned. Yeah, just like I like chocolate spread, I like a lot of reverb. It's the same thing for me, too much all the time. So yeah, the reverb and the delay is very nice on this. And this is applied into the Digitone as well, which I'm not saying this because I work for Elektron, but this has been, like, for me, the best synthesizer experience I've ever had since I started with messing with machines. I started around like 20 years ago, yeah, and this is just the best synthesizer I've ever came up with. It's just so good, I think. It's a 4-track FM synthesizer, and then so you have an FM engine, which is actually simplified, and it's kind of like brought from the past into this times with a modern attitude and a twist. So what we've done here is we have a 4-operator FM engine with 8 algorithms, and this is how it sounds like by default, because FM synthesis is made out of sine waves, and this is just a normal sine wave. And I really like sine waves because you can instantly do this type of stuff. Oh, okay, we need to set the, come on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I really like these type of sounds in there. And it comes with a lot of presets. We worked a lot actually on the presets. I think it comes around 512, and it's like this. So as you can hear, I think this sounds much clearer than the rest of the machines. That's what I noticed of it. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. But I really enjoy that how you edit the sounds on this. So let's have a look at that. So as I said, you have 4 operators in this FM engine. And so you have the ratio control for the 4 operators. So you can do this, change basically the ratio of it. Then you have a simple harmonics parameter that you can change the. I think that crackling is coming from the mic. And then, yeah, you can do that. And so, if you move to the second page, you have 2 envelopes where you actually decide how the frequency modulation is going to happen. And then you have envelopes for this. So if I hold the button, you can make these type of frequency modulation between them. And because of the envelopes, you can get these classic tones that FM is pretty known for. Was anybody playing MS-DOS games back in the day? It's SimCity 2000. This is what I was hearing when building bridges and yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, but I really like these. And then, so let's mess around with it and here it is. And you have reverb, delay, and chorus on this machine. The chorus is a new one. Yeah, this is the chorus. Yeah. Another thing that I really like about it is you have 2 filters in this, which is really a godsend, because you can really shave off like some bass or high, and you can get really good mixes in this. And going back to the Digitakt only has 1 filter, which for me it is something that is actually lacking, but I can work with it. But on this machine, it's really thought about that, I think. So what I'm going to do now here, I'm going to use a high pass filter on this sound to enhance the low end. Here we go. And then, so I go to the second filter and maybe shave off the highs a bit. Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. Then you have a digital drive as well. I think it's kind of similar to the Digitakt, but it's a bit more aggressive and hairy, so to say. I would say that. Then you have different algorithms. So you have 8 algorithms where you can decide how you want the operators to modulate each other. And when you're going through these algorithms, you get to see it on the screen how they're figured out. It's not really clear there, but it's very clear on the screen itself. And you get some different results depending on how you set your the operators and how you're setting the FM modulation envelopes as well. But let's try it like this. This is going to be pretty noisy. Yeah. So now. Sounds were pretty unmusical, but I could show you the patterns that I have made. Let's have a look at this, and then you can easily make this type of music on it. This is only 4 tracks, so the beat that you're hearing is actually done by the preset triggering like we had on the analog 4. So you can save your snares, your kicks into the machine, and then assign them into the sequencer steps. And then you could make a beat like that. Let's go to this one. And you have the control all mode. So if I hold the MIDI button, and I can affect the whole filters, for example. And when I'm ready, I can actually reload with the function load. And it's a really cool way to mess up your sounds and then jump back into where you were. Yeah, you can make this type of stuff too. Look at this. Yeah, it's kind of boring. The reason that I really dig this machine is because it just sounds very different to anything that is out there, in my opinion. And I think one of the things that really attracts me is that I have access to an FM engine, which is very simplified, because I couldn't really program FM synthesizers back in the day. But this time I can actually. So if I reset this, so this is like the default tone, then you can straight away get these sounds, and then maybe I should drive, yeah, and lower it. I mean, these are very different to the traditional synthesizers that you can get right now. And what's really cool is because I'm using the filter here, and having a filter in an FM engine is it's kind of a unique thing. It was not really out there. And we made it because we wanted an FM synthesizer that was accessible. So we have a core engine, which is a FM synthesis. Then you have a filter, which is a multi-mode filter. You have 2 low passes and 1 high pass. And then you have another filter, which has got low and high. You don't have resonance on that, but that's just for like mixing in, putting the tracks where they belong. And then you have a drive parameter and a normal envelope and a digital effects and 2 LFOs. So and then, because this is the sound without the filter, and for me it's too bright. And this is kind of the usual problem with actually FM synths, at least for my experience, that because I don't really know how to program it, and I just want to have a filter, but they don't really offer that. So this is the reason why we combined FM synthesis with subtractive methods, so that you can actually tame this and make it into a usable bass sound actually here. And you also have an arpeggiator for each of the tracks, and then you can, sounds like yeah, let's try to sequence that. So let's put a note here. I want that, and I'm going to set the length for 16 steps. Oops, because that is set. Now it is. So I could go to the. Why is it doing that? Okay. So I could go to the second track, and I could pick up another random presets. So you don't need to program all the sounds from scratch. There you go. This is gonna be good. So in this machine, you don't really need to program sounds because we've actually spent a lot of time coming up with all these unique sounds that you would actually use maybe. So I'm gonna record that in. So as usual with all the same machines that I've shown you, you press record and play and start playing, and it will get recorded into the sequence. I set the sequencer length for 4 bars, which is 64 steps. And then here we go. Wow, that's bizarre. Why did it not record? Wow, it didn't. That's very strange. Wait a minute, what happened there? Yeah, now it did. I don't know what happened with it. Now it's working. So I go to the third track and let's pick another sound. Let's pick another song. Yeah, so you can get all these dreamy sounds, but let's try locking different sounds per step. So you can hold the step, and then with this button, yeah, you can see I'm selecting something on the screen. You can see it. So it's very easy to assign different sounds per step into the sequence. So I've got this kick, donk kick, okay, and I can't hear that. Yeah, I can now. So if we crank it up a bit, yeah. So then I like that kick, so I can copy that kick and place it on the sequences like a 4/4 beats. And I can assign different drum sounds. And maybe this. We got some retrieving as well. No, we don't have retrieving. But you have all the parameters, so you can change it to as you want it. And apply different drum sounds into the sequence too. The ARP is really good because whatever I play, it's in sync with the sequence. Like I wasn't pressing on time, which I never do anyway. So it helps me actually, you can hear the ARP is running in sync, which is very, very cool, I think, to And last but not least, there is an overdrive, master overdrive in the digital. And then let's hear that. Let's see, so if I crank it up. thing to the sound as well. And another difference with the digitone is that the inputs you can apply the sound effects into, and the master, the overdrive, the inputs goes in there too, I think. Yeah, it does, yes. And also the digitone is a 4-track MIDI sequencer as well, so you have 4 audio tracks and then you have 4 MIDI tracks, so it's 8 tracks in total. You can run external gear, and the MIDI tracks have the arpeggiator too. So you have 8 arpeggiators. Oh, I'm sorry, the MIDI tracks do not have the arpeggiators. No, they don't. Yeah, I guess that's it. You guys have got any questions? Yeah.
Are you playing a gig in Frankfurt tonight?
No, I'm not. No. Yes.
We don't have all the money to get all those machines. If I have to get just 1 or just 2 or just 3 machines, what would be the best combination?
It's a very good question, because I need to reply with a question is, what do you find missing when you're making music? What do you feel that you're lacking in your setup or your environment that you make music in? Do you lack the synths or the rhythm, or?
Yeah, okay, for one machine I would say the rhythm. And then I want a rhythm and to have like melodies on that rhythm. So what would be the best option? Because for
I think, like I've gone through all the machines, and one thing I could say is the digitone is the master of polyphony. This thing sounds so rich, as you heard it was like very, very melodic, I think. And on the other machines, I always feel very limited with the polyphony. So if you're a person that you're into pressing chords a lot, that is something that I would really recommend for that. But if you want to make beats, this is not something that I would really recommend. You can make beats on this, but because you only have 4 tracks and you don't actually have a workflow or an interface that is dedicated to a drum machine, so it's more of a synthesizer. So if you're into beats, then I'd say either it's the digitact or the rhythm, I would say. If you're looking for some machine that you're going to make the whole tunes on one machine only, I'd say go for Optic maybe. But you need to be aware that it is a very quite hard workflow at the moment. When I first got mine, I couldn't make a single sound for 40 or an hour. It was very confusing. But again, it came with a very beta OS. This is like a long time ago. But now, yeah, it should in theory make sound out of the box. So that's the reply is the digitone if you want polyphonic synth and chords like Boards of Canada, Apex Twin type of very moody synthy type of music. The digitact if you're into sampling and making these quick beats. You can also make melodies on this, but they won't be polyphonic, they will have to be monophonic, but you can sample chords in there. And if you really want to go, there's a price difference. The rhythm is like 1,600 euros. These are about 800 euros, so it's like this is double. But what you get for double is this is a really serious bit of kit, and only on this you can actually produce very polished tracks. I really believe in this. These ones you can get very close, but you may need some external treatment, I would say. I would treat it personally. On this one, it's very, very cool. And the fact that you can sample into it and process it analogically is very special. So when I say these things, what do you think?
I have the rhythm.
You do? Okay.
One, and I really loved it. Yeah, but
if you already have the rhythm, Mark 1,
yeah.
Do you have any synthesizer with it?
I have an Ord, and I have the Roland Boutique 303.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's it.
It's a guilty pleasure, isn't it, that one? Yeah. So with this, with the machine, I mean, if I were you, because you got the Nord, and the sad fact, there's a con that these cannot sequence MIDI. It's, I think it's pretty bad in my opinion, but it is how it is. We just have to go with it. So then maybe getting one of these with the MIDI sequencer to run your Nord is kind of a cool option. And if you use the Nord with your digitact, the digitact MIDI sequencer can press chords. Let me double check that. Let's not talk crap. And if we go like this, yes, you can assign 4 notes into the sequencer of the digitact. So you can actually press chords on your Nord. And what I would do, I would send the Nord output into the inputs of the digitact and sample the result and leave Nord at home. And then you can actually remix what you have been programming on the Nord and sampling in here and then take it further. So a digitact would be a good companion. But in that case, the digitact is kind of, because you already have the rhythm, so you already kind of have the digitact, because the sampling engine works very similar to that. But the Mark I can't sample, and the rhythm doesn't do MIDI sequencing, so there is that. But do you feel like you are missing more of melodies in your music or beats in your music?
I miss melodies, but I'm doing a lot of techno, so it's not such a drama.
So come on, techno can have melodies. No?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Because I'm really to this digitone. This is the first time I heard it, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's special, this one. Yeah. It's a very unique synthesizer. Yeah. But which Nord was it that you had? I love discussing these things, so I hope you guys are not bored. But yeah.
The Electro one.
The Electro one. Ah, that isn't really a synth as far as I know. It's more of a piano instrument, you know, a player's, not a techno head. Yeah. Okay, then maybe it's a digitone to pair it up with your rhythm, I guess. Because as I said, the rhythm is kind of a half-baked digitact. It's not as needs a bit of substance, a bit of chemicals in his blood to really pop up. But yeah, the digitone would be good, I think. Yeah. Is that it? Any more questions? Yeah.
Do you use the digitact as a tool for studio work? So to get some weird accidents for sampling and just put it into to Ableton and then work whatever? Yeah.
Very good question. I mean, like you saw when I resampled the beat, I think the result was really good. I was like, damn, that's really good. Yeah. So there is a very good happy accident which applies to all the Elektron machines. But personally, I don't really use Ableton for multi-tracking. I'm a bit allergic to multi-tracking because then I spend a lot of time on the boxes arranging a track, and I don't enjoy that. I know it's there, and I know how powerful it is, and I know how endless and crazy music creation on Ableton is. Unlimited tracks and unlimited plugins and unlimited effects, unlimited filters. But I get lost in that, so I really like to keep my tunes on the machines. And that's what I've been doing lately, actually. Just on these two, I'm making a set. And then the octa track is here, so it mixes them too. Then I have my modular effects rack in between, so that I could send them back and forth. And then I just record the stereo output. That's the way that I enjoy personally working. But this may change when Overbridge arrives, and if it works the way that I can deal with it. Because it's a complicated software, I don't know if it's gonna, So yeah, we'll see, but yeah, I'm not into multi-tracking, I just like to keep it on the machines and then record it, that's what I like. But, you know, there's many other people here and everybody's got a different workflow. I think what you're saying is really cool, to be able to come up with a happy accident and then record it on Ableton, that's one track, and then you could apply and apply. That is really a good workflow, and I wish I could actually live like that, but it just doesn't work with the way that I enjoy making music. I think I just enjoy twiddling with these type of synths, so I guess it's not even about making music for me. But yeah. You were saying something, right?
Yeah, I just think the more or less the digitone, it's really a new thing in between all these machines and the synthesizers world. I have the feeling that the combination between the rhythm, because when I personally listen the rhythm and the octa track and so on, it just from the speakers the sound is massive. I mean, it's really taking it all 360 degrees. It's invading you with harmonics and so on. when you listen to the Digitact and the Digitone, you have a narrow spectrum of listening,
right.
and you can immediately feel it. Some people might not hear it, some people might not feel it, but it's there. So what's interesting, I think, on the Digitone is the possibility to trick the sound of the FM and get this sweet. This is what new to me. It's really interesting. But combine it maybe with something that is able to take the ground, like a bass, or it can be the rhythm, or it can be the
Octatrack.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think the rhythm and the Digitone is a great combination. Coming to your question, I think that's really cool, because this thing makes sounds that I haven't heard elsewhere actually. We're again getting lost into this, but yeah, it's really interesting stuff that you can get out of this. And then let's have the growth. This type of stuff, then
very futuristic.
Yeah, very futuristic. What happened? The future came, man. Let's see. Okay, I know what's happening. This is a great feature to show actually before we say goodbye. So yeah, let's see here. So I was telling you that you can frequency modulate like this, okay? Yeah. So you have these two envelopes. Can you see it on the screen? A bit there, you can, on this page. Now, the envelope starts as soon as I hit the button. Bow, bow. You hear it, and then you can make it longer. Yeah, okay. That's better now, okay. Then you could actually delay this envelope. So I could set the parameter to 16. So you get the idea that the envelope is triggered via delay, and that is very futuristic, because you're actually purposefully messing with the trigger of the envelopes. That's pretty cool, I think. Let's do the same for the other one. And then this is the other one. So actually it sounds like I'm triggering 3 sounds here. And of course, if you spend time on this, and get the ratios right, so it's musically correct, which it isn't. Oh, it's actually better now. Okay, let's see here. Yeah. And another really cool thing about these delaying the envelopes is actually synced to the BPM. So if I lower the BPM, so they're very attached to the sequencer, and this is a really cool feature, I think. Yeah. So yeah, this machine is definitely something weird and really cool to mess around with, yeah. Any other questions? No? Then I guess that's it then. Well, thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you.